Hi everyone, my name is Genevieve Noel and welcome back to my channel.
The only heartache that I ever faced was a need of fortune and a dream of fame. I took those empty feelings and turned them into love. It cheats time, it's the eye in the storm of the universe. I got mine. Where do you think that you will find your
If you are new here, this channel surrounds my 2020 goals and me reaching them. And today we are talking about writing. So as you know, I have goals to finish 2 books this year that I have been working on and off, but I just wanted to talk about something related to that. Of course, my goal is to complete my books, but I don't want to do a crappy job on my books, so I wanted to talk about some things that are good tips for writers. So if you're watching this, you may be interested in writing a book or publishing a book one day, or just wanting to improve your writing, and so I have 8 different tips that will help you improve your writing. And even if it's just things to think about and say, okay, I'm already doing pretty well on that part, so I don't need to focus on it, it will still help you to be able to identify what areas are your strong suits and what areas you're not doing so great in. So to start off, I don't want to talk about this as like setting, plot, characters, none of that business. All those things are super important, but I want to look at it from a totally different perspective. The first thing that is most important when you've gotten to the point in your book that you're not just writing for you anymore, you're writing for an audience, you want other people to read it, the very first thing that you want to ask yourself is, who am I writing for, right? Your audience, who are they? And in a bigger sense, remembering that you are still writing for yourself. So if you've forgotten that you're writing for yourself, your drive to write will definitely diminish because it's either no longer enjoyable or it feels like a task, something you have to do. So find a way to rediscover how to write for you. On top of that, identify your audience. And I don't mean like, oh, these are the type of people that are reading my book. No, who do I want to read my book? I don't want to exclude anybody, right? Like, that's what I think of when I think of writing. I don't want to exclude any categories, but who is going to enjoy this and who isn't, right? Who is interested in my book? Who's going to be interested in my characters? How can I branch out into other audiences while keeping the themes and the plot of the book consistent with what I'm already writing? Okay, so I'm not saying, oh, this is my audience, I should write for that audience. No, identify who your audience is and then see if you can get into any other audiences and make the book still really good, right? Like, I talk about some themes that are a little bit more complex than just young adult fiction literature. And I do this because of a lot of reasons, but in terms of audience, I think about it like, well, I want, if parents are going to read this with their teenagers, probably not, but some parents do like to peruse books before their teenagers read them, or teachers like to use them for their classes. And I want to look at it and say, okay, what value am I bringing that is not just interesting to these teenagers or these young adults, but what value am I bringing educationally? Is that information correct? How does that transfer over to kind of draw in these other audiences, right? So when I say audience, who are you writing for? Why are you writing for them is my second tip. Why am I writing for my audience? What do I want them to get out of my book? Now, if we boil this down, it's theme, right? That's our kind of answer to this question. But beyond theme, I want to know, what do I want to tell the world? What is my message? And again, very similar to theme, but theme is typically just one word. I want you to write a paragraph, right? Write down a paragraph. What am I trying to get out to these people? And if it takes you a whole page to get your point across, that might be a good thing. Honestly, I think that if I were to write what the point of certain classic novels was, it would be a page, because they didn't really have a point at first, right? They were writing because it made them money. It was also good, but like there are a lot of things going on in those classic novels. And not that it's a bad thing, but there's a lot going on. So then once you've gotten your why am I writing? Why am I writing for this audience? What do I want them to get out of it? What message do I really want them to bring home? Your writing, you can look to that at every turn and look at almost like your mission statement. Pin it up on your wall and say, am I accomplishing that? And not every detail is going to do that, but every detail should lead to that, right? And it's kind of a guide for where we want things to go. Okay, I'm going to write this scene about them being in a gift shop, but what does that have to do with the plot? What does that have to do with my mission statement? Does it accomplish either of those things for me? If not, probably don't need the scene, right? Could be really interesting, but probably don't need it in this book. Number 3 is similar to what I was saying about those classic novels. Do not write a classic novel. And you may be going, okay, what? Like, I want to be a canon author, right? That's everyone's dream, is to do something that becomes a classic. I am with you. What I'm saying is, don't write long books. Don't write because it makes money. Write because it's enjoyable, right? Because it's what you're meant to do, right? Because you have a story to tell. Don't write because it makes you money. A lot of classic novels, and I really like to use Tale of Two Cities as an example, they were published in installments. So partial chapters went out into like newspapers essentially, and they got paid for those. So there's a lot that went on in there that even the author would admit they really didn't need, but it's just there because they could, or they needed to fill it. Half the time the fillers you think you need, you really, really don't. So refer back to those previous steps when you're thinking about adding in a scene. Again, am I writing like a classic author, or am I writing this because it matters to this story and I want it to show my message? Tip number 4. Now this one, I don't know how else to title it except characters. I love my characters so much, and a big part of me writing is wanting to share those characters with the world, okay? I also am terrible at characterization, okay? And I could say, this is what I did to help myself get better at characterization, but I don't even know that I'm there yet, right? That's one of my weaknesses, is characterization. So in my tip for characters, think of your characters as people. And think about how you think of them, right? You don't make a list, because if you try to make it visual, it's not going to be as simple. It's going to take a little bit longer, and this is just a simple exercise. Think about your characters as people, right? You picture them, you envision them. If there's something about them you can't picture, your audience definitely can't, simply because you haven't pictured it yet. There are a few very rare exceptions to this where, like, someone won't list a hair color or an eye color or something like that for a character because you couldn't decide, but your audience has picked that already. Like, they already envision it. I'm talking about, when I see this person, what emotions do I see? If I can't tell, your audience can't tell, and that's the important part. Another really big thing about your characters is ask somebody how they feel about your characters. Someone who's read your work, someone who has heard you talk about writing or your books or whatever. When you describe your characters, whether it's in conversation or in your story, how are you portraying them? What are they getting out of those characters? And beyond that, what is missing that you can see but your audience can't? And then work from there. Tip number 5. Okay, this one is a little bit confusing, but remember that there are more than one type of relationship. Especially in young adult fiction novels, we focus on 2 aspects of relationship, that physical romantic relationship because it's fun, and then they'll either pick between friends or family relationships. Usually the family relationship will be crap, and so the friendships are really strong, rather than a person, a real person in existence, has all 3 of those relationships. And then stemming from those 3 relationships, they have acquaintances, they have professional coworkers or whatever. how they treat those three main relationships are going to affect how they treat other characters. And in order to make our characters feel as loved to everyone else as they are to us, we have to show that relationship of your characters to one another. Number 6, you do not have to define setting in order for your setting to be present. Okay, and I know that this seems kind of like a fundamental thing in English. Once you get up to the upper levels of like high school, we talk about how setting is more than just, time and place, but it talks about era and it talks about political arena environment. Newsflash, you do not have to specify a year or a month or a day in order to get across what time this is happening. And that is so clear in things like Hunger Games and Divergent, right? Like they didn't give us years, they just gave us events. Okay, so those events can be your setting. It's weird to think about, but this is especially important for new authors as you're writing. When I started out, I was like, it's the year 2055, and this has happened, and blah, 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 right? I had all those event elements, but I had to list the months and the date and the year, and maybe that's important information for you as an author to know. I know sometimes I need to visualize that. I do. However, it's not necessarily always that important for your audience to know that information because to them, it's a post-apocalyptic universe. And that's all that really matters. The political stuff that happened, the wars that happened that actually affect your plot and what happens in your book are also really important things. Not to say that those other details aren't really interesting and exciting, but they may be clutter rather than important info. Tip number 7. You've heard me say it a couple of times. Clutter. We want to get rid of the clutter, okay? Again, especially as a new author, this is so hard because writing is just important. So don't take what you've written and go, this isn't important, this doesn't talk about my theme, and just trash them. Keep those things. Please, please, please keep those things. I wrote a part of a story in my first novel that I ended up using as a start for a totally different novel by changing the characters because the plot, that scene was not true to my characters. Okay, and there are many reasons that clutter exists. Your characters don't fit in the scene doesn't fit your setting, it doesn't talk about your message, it doesn't talk about your theme, it doesn't whatever your reasoning is. There's so many reasons to get rid of clutter. But don't get rid of it. This is where I caution you. Keep that somewhere. Keep it written down. Keep it in your first draft even. I take them out of my first draft and make them separate stories and as little chunks, as little background, as little bits of information. Yeah, this is totally my characters and it's totally important to who they are, but you get this in another spot as well, and it's just a fun little piece that I was excited to write. And then put them in an archive of some sort for either yourself or to show to other people. If you check out my website, listed down below, GenevieveNoelBooks.weebly.com, you'll notice I have archives for a lot of my stories, specifically Prophagorum. Prophagorum, I have tons of archives because I had tons to write about them. There's a whole second book and that's coming, a sequel to that book that is coming actually. But I had so much to say, even in the first book, and the in-between time, that I couldn't fit it all into the books. And it was important information, in my opinion, because it was character building, but it wasn't necessary to the stories themselves. So they're there, people get to read them and enjoy them as much as I do, but they're not cluttering up my novel. That clutter can really, really, really cause distractions. It can cause your audience to get off track, and it can just take away from how good of a writer you actually are. My 8th and final tip is don't forget how good of a writer you are. And this sounds so similar to number 1, remember you're writing for you, but don't forget that you have talent. You started this for a reason. Even if it's just because it's enjoyable, enjoying writing is a gift. It is a talent. Not everyone likes it. Not everyone thinks that they're good at it or wants to share with the world. If you are a person who is putting this book out there for other people to read, I applaud you, because you don't have to do that, right? We could keep these stories for ourselves and the world wouldn't be any the wiser. And yet they're missing out on something so wonderful, because every single writer is talented. Sometimes that talent needs to be shaped and curved and toned, but that talent exists. And remind yourself often that you are a good enough writer. You are good enough. That doesn't mean that you can't improve. Everyone can learn and grow. But you are still good enough and you still deserve to write, and people should be reading your book. Now, all of this being said, take my tips as much as you want to use them. If you don't, great, you got some new information. If you do, I'd love to hear how it helped you or if it changed your writing at all. If you need help or want editing advice, see my info down below, and you can email me or IM me on Instagram and send me bits of your book. I would love to beta read for you or just give you some advice or just get a second set of eyes on things. Whatever you need, I would love to help you out. So don't forget to reach out to me. Otherwise, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe, and then hit the bell down below so you can get notifications for when more videos come out. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Love, Genevieve.